Hello and a warm Collisions YYC welcome to one of my favorite guests, one of my returning guests, the lovely, the talented Miss Crystal Phillips. How you doing, Crystal?
Oh, I'm so good. It's always fun to talk with Tyler.
Crystal, thank you. You fill me up. The sun is shining inside and out. I love it. We are overdue. We bumped into each other during Stampede. Some things have changed in your world. I've known a few versions of you. I think met you first at the Near Labs and then obviously the Branch Out Foundation. So many things that you've been involved in and brought a really positive impact to. I was pretty excited when I saw the announcement that you are the new senior director at Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, affectionately referred to in our community and here on out as OCIF. 5 months in, how's it going? I'll start there.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's going really well, and it's been a pleasant surprise to know that even though economic development is a whole new type of investing, the people, the events, the strategic thinking is all really similar to everything I've done in the past. So they all work well together, and I bring in experiences from my various other hats and past experiences to this role. And it's actually quite complementary. And so, of course, you always go through that like imposter syndrome at the beginning. You're like, oh, what did I just do? Am I good for this position? Can I add value? And you're always looking to add value as quickly as possible. And it's been a really warm welcome by the community, by the ecosystem, as we all know in it. As long as you're not a jerk, everybody supports you. And I would say that the community is quite small still, despite the growing activity that's happening. So it's been easy to connect and pattern match all of the activity and people and align their incentives through this new portal and new type of funding through the OCIF fund.
Oh, I appreciate that. I love it. Calgary's too small of a town to be a jerk. You can be a jerk, but no one's not going to not know.
It's so true. Just don't be a jerk.
Yeah, no, don't be a douche. Yeah, no, 100%. Can you take us on the elevator ride? What's an OCIF? Let's be as simple and really set the table for this call for people that are like, I know Crystal, but I heard she has this new gig. I wonder what that is about. Because like you said, when you know about something in a town like Calgary, you feel everybody knows. But a few conversations, you quickly go, wait a second, maybe not everyone is as clear. So let's jump in the elevator and give us the 5 months in elevator pitch. And then maybe we can talk about, things that you've been surprised about even on your own journey so far.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I mean, it's complex and simple all at the same time. I mean, the three buzzwords we use is we find, fuel, and foster. So we look for opportunities where we're either creating jobs, creating companies, attracting companies to Calgary, we're upskilling talent or accelerating the growth of a company. And really, it's like it's the ecosystem play to make sure that all of those entrepreneurs and innovators in the cities can thrive. And so we find those kinds of opportunities, whether they are funds investing in companies, whether they are accelerator, incubator type programs. One of our darlings lately has been the Knowledge Society, where they upskill or they teach and train entrepreneurial type skills to young students that are just above and beyond what you would ever expect a high school student capable of. And so their stories are really inspiring, and they have so much information of these students going on to work for NASA and building companies of the future. So looking not only at the immediate needs, but also looking at in the distance of, even 10 to 50 years from now, what's needed to grow the economy. So we find and are very curious about all of those opportunities. And then fostering would be, we put real capital behind it, fueling with real capital. And as you may have heard, OCIF started as a $100 million fund back in 2018, which is super innovative and unique to Calgary. And then because of the momentum and the success and the impact that it's been making, and part of the reason why I joined OCIF is they got recapitalized with another $60 million. So now...
That was just at the end of last year or the beginning of this year?
It was just at the end. It was actually in the spring of this year.
Of 2025.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it was announced a week before I officially started.
Good timing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you came into some fresh, you had some dry powder.
Which is kind of crazy because I've always been fundraising in venture capital and charity. So it's kind of crazy to have money.
You got
that
to come
I
in
didn't raise.
after the funds have already been landed.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Curious, just coming back to your find, if I want to pick on that a little bit, how do you filter? Because that's a lot going on. Like just what you touched on of like, like entrepreneurs from students all the way up to scale ups, to jobs, to bringing companies to the city, and this is not what I mean, but I'm kind of asked like, what do you choose to say no to, or what do you ignore versus what you say yes? Because those all felt like easy yeses. Of course, we want to support young talent. Of course, we want to bring amazing companies to the city. How do you guys as an organization, like what filters do you use to manage just the fact that I'm sure you're inundated every day with cool stuff? Like say all things are equal and they're all awesome. How do you guys as an organization filter that? Yeah,
it's a good question. And there are several filters with different weights. It's no different than the due diligence process for venture capital that I was used to. I would say in venture capital, the heaviest weight often went to the people, the founder and the founding team. And so that is still very top of mind. It's whoever is leading a program or a company or an initiative that is of interest to fund, they have to have those characteristics of, they're passionate, they're ruthlessly prioritizing on the mission that they're set out to achieve. They have that grit and resilience. And so I look for that quite heavily. And then the typical metrics that we look for is can it create jobs, indirect or direct jobs? Can it attract talent from outside of Calgary into Calgary? Can it upskill the talent that already exists here? Especially as tech increases and demands for what's needed in the world is changing, that changes the skill sets and needs for talent. Upskilling talent, and then the amplification of any of those metrics. So what I mean by that is if it's a fund, for example, we invest in a fund, which then attracts investors. It may de-risk their investment. It may educate them on early stage investing. That gives access to capital to early stage companies that are then going to upskill talent, whether it's a university grad who now learns how to transfer their technical skills into building a business, or it's actually creating various jobs within that company. And then, of course, if that company exits, that money will continue to grow within the city. So we look at like the amplification efforts of the projects we fund.
And I love that, thinking about, you said it earlier, whether it's 5 years or 50, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, that amplification of that larger life cycle. And even from doing the podcast in the early days, like, oh, we're just so early. We just haven't had a couple of the turns. And now 5 years later, it's starting to there's been a few exits. There's people that are still very young and enthusiastic, and age doesn't have to be part of that, but enthusiastic, and they're ready to go back in. But now they've learned all those skills from an exit and raising money. And I'm excited to see us kind of getting a little bit more time, time on type. We've done a few more reps. We've been out on the track a little bit longer, to use some sports analogies. Being able to look long-term while still making short-term decisions, that's a tricky balance for anybody in business, especially investing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's also tricky in the communication of why you're investing in something. Yeah. You have the insights, Calgary Economic Development, they have this foresight team, and they look 20 to 50 years out. They're brilliant. They contract to other brilliant firms to make sure that we have... That's a
superpower. To look that far out is a superpower. It's so abstract for most people. It's so hard to wrap your head around it, because we trip over the things that we can grab onto or that cause us to react, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, obviously we care about our own futures and our family's futures. And so this is really important for us to have that insight into what is next. And part of that strategy, and going back to sort of the filter of what we're trying to find and how we determine what is or isn't a fit, is we've also identified, based on a lot of research, what areas do we have a right to win in Calgary? What infrastructure is already in existence?
What areas do we have the right to win in? I love that.
Yeah. What talent do we already have here? Or if it's 20 to 50 years out, where do we have a right to win in the future? Where do we want to win in the future? So there have been sectors that probably won't be a surprise to many Calgarians that have been identified as areas of focus where we double down on these sectors, and we actually call them hubs and nodes and sectors. So
life sciences hub, aerospace, like some of the ones that I get really excited about. Yeah.
Exactly. So sectors would be agriculture, energy transition, aerospace and defense, the creative industries, life sciences. And so at transportation and logistics, having all of those sectors as a focus area, then you come down to the geographic location where you create those natural collisions for the experts within those sectors. So we call those nodes. So for example, the northwest area of the city, there's a lot of activity that's happening in the life sciences sector. We have the Life Sciences Innovation Hub. We have the University of Calgary with the Hotchkiss Brain Institute and the Libin Institute and all of the Cummings School of Medicine, the Veterinarian School, and BioHub. So having all of that activity all in the Northwest, you naturally go to the grocery store in University Village, and it's not uncommon that you would run into someone within that sector and you have that sometime a richer conversation than an intentional meeting. So that's the power of a node. And then something new that we're doubling down at with OCIF and that this new $60 million is a physical hub, which would be a bricks and mortar place that's dedicated to that sector focus. And so we have the Life Sciences Innovation Hub. Something that we're working on as a potential new hub would be a health and human performance hub. If you know about my background, that's a big passion area.
I do.
But what's really cool about all of these hubs, whether it's the aerospace hub, the agriculture hub, transportation and logistics, there's a lot of crossover and cross-sector overlap between all of these hubs, because whatever wearable that's going to enhance sport could actually be a wellness product for, my dad to wear to detect AFib for his heart condition. So he's wearing a sport product for a preventative wellness product. And then you talk to someone who is a rancher from the agriculture sector, and they're like, oh, my cows actually wear something similar.
100%.
And so
smart watches for cows. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so OCIF, I'm kind of talking a lot to that fostering piece, because it's one thing to find and fuel these hubs, these programs and sectors. It's another thing to foster it. And we have the privilege of sitting at the treetops, seeing all of everything at play, and understanding who do we introduce to who, and how do we be really intentional about creating the cross-sector overlap opportunities.
As an organization, how do you balance the messaging around back to the 10, 5, 15, 20 years? Each one of those hubs could be their own initiative. And if that's what's important to you, you can get really hyper-focused on it. But when you're thinking about it at the OCIF level, even how you communicate it out to the community to say, hey, this is how we're using your money. This is how we're doing it. Just playing around with, and it's maybe a conceptual question, but balancing out that, yeah, we're doing all of these hubs because we're looking far enough out that it might not seem like, how do you balance people staying invested in that long-term vision of like, you're right, this might benefit people that are outside my own cycle, but the need to diversify and put as much weight into these different hubs as possible just feels like an interesting balance between investment, energy, and also how you communicate that, the comms side of it, to make sure that community at large, or all of us who are taxpayers into this thing and are in for the short term and maybe the long haul, how do you keep that message balanced in your mind, even of the long versus short term, and keeping people feeling like, yes, the things we're doing today are right for today, and they're also going to yield in the future?
Yeah, it's such a good question. You can tell that you have a marketing background and brain, because it is so important. And it's actually why I love so much that we have the creative industries as an area of focus, because I think the arts is one of the best opportunities to use as a portal to communicate all of these complex initiatives that are happening.
Fully support.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it's very well accepted. In fact, one of the one of the lead champions of the agriculture sector and hubs comes from Ad Farm, and they are an agriculture advertising company. And so you go into their office and you just feel inspired and creative based on how the office is designed. Their logo is cool. It's just like the way that they can tell a story is really impressive. And you can tell that they look at those, what I would call space between, like the little details that often get overlooked or missed, because it's not about having the perfect business plan all the time. It's sometimes about it's not the what, but the how. And so I'm hoping that we can utilize and lean on the creative industries and that kind of talent to be able to help tell the story. The other thing that I'm really impressed in since starting, Brad Perry has a background in marketing and advertising. I know he does.
Yeah, Brad and I've talked about
it. Brad is the CEO of both Calgary Economic Development and OCIF. He's an incredible ambassador for the city and for both organizations. And so when I talk to him, he always has that perspective. And so we share that appreciation for what needs to happen in addition to, finding the right program, making sure that
how we tell the story
it's suitable
too.
And
I'm curious, because I've known you. I met you through Thin Air. I met you with Branch Out. Thinking about your own journey, and I always love talking to individuals like yourself that are like, you're on to your next thing and you're excited about it, you're engaged. What has venture capital, Crystal, had to maybe give up or change her thinking around to become OCIF Crystal? It's maybe a weird question. I don't know.
No, it's a great question. I get it all the time, as you can imagine, because people are like, what? You were a speed skater and then started a neuroscience charity and then worked in venture capital and now you work at OCIF. And actually the through line and the common denominator really is about using money to create impact. At first, it was impact in neuroscience, then it was impact in entrepreneurship, and now it's impact on the ecosystem. And so that's sort of how I see it. And because of that, people who have common interests in those areas are the same people that I've been working with for now 20 years. Also thanks, because hopefully I haven't been a jerk, but also...
I'll boldly say you haven't, but again, I don't know. I wasn't always around. I hear nothing, but I love though that big small town phenomenon. And like you said, it's kind of the same people, and that network and that ability to leverage outcomes based on community in Calgary. It is 100% one of our superpowers, I think. And I think you have done such a great job of ingratiating yourself in our community and always being out there, and you're tireless. I see you at events. I see you doing things. But it's always been in service of others. And that to me is an easy through line to pull to what you're doing now.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, my observation from the outside on a very positive. So you're only 5 months in.
Yeah. Is it even 5 months? But
sorry, according to your LinkedIn profile, that's my source of truth.
I'm not great at math.
What did you think when you started versus what you think now? Like, how is your journey as you're discovering OCIF, which I think is so good for many of us listening, because we see these acronyms and we maybe met somebody or we have a snippet, but that's sometimes our one-dimensional view of the elephant. I just saw the front leg and that's all I think it is. What have you learned so far on your journey that's either blown you away, got you excited, or surprised you?
Oh, what gets me most excited is about how strategic OCIF is and how I get to go to the treetops and be super strategic with some of the smartest people in the city. And then I get to go really specific and dive deep into a project. And the team has this ability to context switch 100 times in a day, but also be flexible in their thinking. That's a superpower unto itself to be able to do that well. Yeah. And so I see people doing that around me all the time. We share an office with Calgary Economic Development. And although we're a separate entity, we have a separate board and all that, there's a lot of collaboration between the two. And I'm so impressed with the research, the entrepreneurialism, and the speed at which they work. And because I've been on the other side of OCIF funding, because Thin Air Labs Fund 1 was funded by OCIF and it was a catalyst. And I don't think we would have had the success we've had we not got the funding from OCIF. And they have learned
what a great circle for you, to be involved in it and to be on both sides or see the experience, the benefit of it, and now being able to contribute that same point of view. I think that's really powerful.
And you know what? They knew I was coming in with this VC entrepreneur. Like I think once I shook Brad's hand and said, okay, I'm going to take on this role. Then I admitted to him that I've never had a real job before. Like I didn't understand what like the HR was. And so what I loved about that is they were very welcoming. In fact, they were craving that kind of mentality, and they were super open to it. So when I gave feedback on what it was like being on the other side, they have their eyes and ears wide open, and they're super interested in making changes to really be in service of the beneficiary. Like we are in the service of others, and having that culture as a mindset when we're working with people who have these great ideas, kind of putting them first is, I think, it's not a new mentality, but I definitely see them increasing their focus in and really making sure that they see it that way.
Well, and respectfully, brand new in 2018, they're growing and learning too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The they, the we, the group that is an organization. You get better. You get better at things, and you give some things up, and you take some new things on, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And like I said, this is a very innovative fund. It's not like every city has an OCIF. So they were building
there wasn't a playbook you could just pull off the shelf. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. It was inspired by a fund in Waterloo, and but it was kind of the first of its kind, definitely in Calgary. So to take that leap, and you had to be scrappy. And so I think that's where the entrepreneurialism comes from.
Talk to me a little bit. So when you say about Waterloo, I've had a few people on, and people that were kind of in the OGs in the Waterloo environment, they talked about, I forget what it was called, but there was that specific environment where everybody would get an office. They would all bang into each other. They would all, so-and-so would be across the hallway. And any place you see that type of deep rooted innovation, especially kind of then that tech cycle, there's usually a physical premise that goes with it. Why I like so much your hub philosophy. People still bump into people, right? It's whether it's the Pixar story of putting, Steve Jobs putting the bathroom in one place so everyone had to run into each other. Those stories come out over and over again of innovation that happens 15 feet and below, and often in a physical environment for people. So I'm a big fan of, I know Waterloo, any of the people I talked to that were there in the early days, they all affectionately refer to how they all kind of ended up in the same space. So I think there's some good learning to be taken from that.
And they're still learning, because I've heard from someone who was very involved with that, the creation of the innovation sector in Waterloo. Mm-hmm. They had mentioned, there was a lot of focus on startups and that early stage capital. And there's been a lot more focus on that in Calgary over the last 5 years. Because you could argue that in the last 5 years to a decade ago, that didn't exist. And so if you had an innovation coming out of the university labs, and we're just so ripe with IP and commercializable IP, but there was no soft landing spot. So you would actually just skip over and go to the States if you wanted to actually build a company beyond the lab. And so that has changed dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years. However, now it's like humans are so excited about growth. And so it's like, okay, we created some momentum in the early stage. Now let's go to scale. And as much as I agree that we should go to scale, first of all, we need to define what does scale mean, because it's different to a Canadian than it is to the States. Because venture and venture capital is actually quite new in Canada, relatively speaking. Mm-hmm. So we need to identify what does scaling mean to us, but also let's not lose sight of continuing to support the top of the funnel, which is like the early stage startups and company creation, and making sure there's always a bridge from academia, especially.
I really like what you said. It's so easy when you're focusing on an initiative to go, okay, we did that. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. But there has to be an always on approach to that. So it keeps churning and doesn't lose focus because we shifted into another area. So I'm curious about putting on your leader manager in a boardroom. And I know a few people that are on the board. You've got some powerhouse human beings involved in OCIF. Some good friends of mine are involved there. Talk to me about decision-making. Like, how do you land on, okay, these ideas are all good. Which one's slightly more good or a slightly better fit? And I know there's all kinds of filters we can use, but I guess I'm looking to peer or be a fly on the wall inside those rooms where you've got so many talented, passionate, smart, experienced experts. but you have to get a degree of consensus to move forward. So I'm not asking for any dirty laundry. I'm actually really trying to understand. Well, you can share whatever you like, but I really want to understand, if I was a fly on the wall, how does some of that decision making happen when you've got such powerful human beings in a room? It can be amazing, and it can also be tricky. I've been in those rooms and you're like, this is going to be great. And it's like, oh my God, this was a battle. It felt like almost.
Yeah.
a tussle, maybe. A battle sounds negative. It's more of a tussle.
It often comes down to that marketing communications as well. Like the best part about all of it is that there is no shortage of passion and expertise. Like, it's pretty incredible, and it speaks volumes to OCIF by just the quality of the board that we have and have always had. All the big players of the city have played a role in OCIF. So that's super exciting because that means that people like myself, who are boots on the ground, we have this expertise to draw from, and these are the kinds of conversations we can have. And so ensuring that we always are curious and keep our eyes and ears wide open, and then making sure that there's an opportunity for us to have those discussions. The discussions are they're very thoughtful and respectful. So it's cool because I've had various board experiences, and the process is quite dialed in at OCIF. So we collaborate with Calgary Economic Development, internally, obviously, Calgary Economic Development, and then we have committees on the board that we will meet with. So we have an investment committee, for example. We'll discuss, what we want to push through and why. We have rich discussions about that, and then what's in the pipeline. And that's also an opportunity to be ideating what are the needs in the ecosystem that they're seeing from their perspective that we should also consider to get into the pipeline. And of course, then we bring it to the board level for approval. So it is a bureaucratic process, but because of that, it's also highly respected, and that also sends a signal to other funders, whether it's Prairie Scan or even corporates, that okay, if OCIF is funding this project, it went through a proper process by these experts, and they've all come to a commitment to fund this. Maybe I should be looking at it or funding it as well. So,
well, it's such a powerful proof point, right? To have a trusted organization investing. Then for myself as a follow along, or someone who wants to get in on that round, oh, okay, well, if so-and-so already thinks it's good, and I know that they're run a pretty tight operation, like there's that, it's just a huge checkbox of validation, right? Because ultimately we're always trying to create trust and some sense of security in often what is an unknown, obscure place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Investing in future potential is tricky, but that's obviously sounds so familiar to your world of venture capital.
Yeah, it's like let OCIF do the hard work of the bureaucratic and the due diligence, and take our time with that, and then hopefully that de-risks other people's investments.
It sends a message to the community. Personal question now, because as you know, I'm a fan of curiosity, and I love curiosity for its ability to embrace and unpack and peel out. But there's sometimes a need to decide. And that's a question I've had, or a conversation I've had with some leaders, like, where do you draw the line and say, okay, we've been curious enough. We need to make a decision now to go forward. Even in your own journey with so much that you've been involved with, how do you balance, because I know you to be a curious person, very open. How do you balance that? Okay, I've got enough data now. I've got enough whatever I need. I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to move forward. And yeah, it might be perfect. It might not be, might be right, might be wrong. But I've explored curiosity to a point that now I have to decide. How do you juggle those two as a leader?
Oh, I think this is the power of unlike minds and collecting the right people around you, knowing what your strengths are. Mine would probably be, filling the funnel. I would say the finding piece. When it comes to the fueling piece, this is when I have, an incredible army, and also the co-senior director, Angie. And they're very good at actually, taking all of these big ideas, these opportunities, getting it approved by the board, and then executing on getting it through to the finish line. And that helps me continue to fill the funnel, which is super important because you have to kind of do both in parallel. So I think as a leader, in whatever hat I've worn in the past, it's about collecting what I call unlike minds. These are people who are, maybe mission aligned, but have completely different skill sets and focus areas.
To me, it's so critical. I love the concept of unlike minds. I will borrow that and use it in a sentence later today. It's so critical, and it's so easy to fall into the trap of surrounding yourself with people that see the world the way you do. it amplifies risk in a way you don't even realize until you've already sailed off the cliff, holding hands, cheering each other on how awesome of a decision you just made.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, we've so been there. So from a individual performance perspective, coming into an established organization, does that set you up for success as a team member? That's like, do you have clear mandates of what you're accountable to, as well as the organization? Like, do they do a good job? And I'm assuming they do, but how does that impact you? Coming in new is always so critical, the 30, 60, 90, your first 90 days. Okay, I understand the organization, what they're trying to do. How does that then manifest down to my Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock in terms of what Crystal invests time and energy in?
Yeah. You know what? I am still figuring that piece out. And ultimately making sure that the team is structured appropriately, and that are even just looking at the org chart and ensuring that it's setting us all up for success, so that I can be playing my strengths and be the crazy entrepreneur who, can bring in lots of ideas. I'm messy, I'm not an attention to details person. I know enough to be dangerous in many different sectors. And so I can take that, but I better make sure that I have a good process and expertise in the next steps to be able to execute on all of this and oversee it all along the way. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer because in many ways, I really respect the fact that this is a much bigger organization than I'm used to working with. We're not building it from scratch, which is also different for me. So I respect, any kind of frustrations that come along with that for someone like me. But they also, to their credit, really respect that that's where I come from and that's what they feel they are lacking and need. And so we're just in consistent communication and building a culture of respect and trust, so that we can move through those barriers as quickly as possible and just stay focused on the mission.
I love what you said there. You chose them and they chose you. Eyes wide open is really the key to that. It's not that we're different. That was the point, right? Is what I heard. We wanted something. When you want something different, then you get it, and you're like, "Oh, be careful what you wish for." I think that can apply in all cases. Like, I want it to be more this way. I want it to be more rigid. Then the entrepreneur in you goes, "Oh my God, this is so rigid. What's going on here?" I'm like, "Well, wait a second. You got to take both sides of it." I do really appreciate though your honesty on that. That it is a discovery and it is a journey. But as long as you've got good communication and some trust at the base of the pyramid, the rest can be messy. And being human is messy. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, and I had to give myself a self-talk, like a pump up talk, to be like, okay, these are your strengths, and don't be afraid to speak your mind, because as tendencies to be either a people pleaser or a teacher's pet, it's like you want to just like follow the rules and follow along, and you don't want to disrupt or offend anybody. But I knew that they hired me for the reasons that I hoped they hired me for.
Yes,
and so that. I was doing them a disservice if I didn't speak my mind and offer alternative perspectives. So I'm pleasantly surprised with how well it's been received.
That makes me very happy to hear that. A little bit of psychological safety to just be yourself goes a long way. You mentioned the word imposter syndrome at the beginning, and it's something that gets endlessly positive response, almost for us, there's the wrong reason, because so many of us experience it. You're 5 months in. Where are you on the imposter syndrome scale? I've never seen the imposter syndrome scale, but I think we all can imagine it. Oh, maximum imposter syndrome is like, no, I'm starting to be who I am and seeing where that's valued. How do you, as a professional who from the outside looks like you've kind of done it all and got it figured? That's why I love the honesty of saying something like imposter syndrome. How do you juggle that, and how's been part of that as an accomplished person in a new role?
Yeah, good question. I mean, if I don't have imposter syndrome, that's when I'm worried. I'm like, I didn't try hard enough. I didn't think big enough. I'm not moving towards my big goals. And the more you accomplish, the bigger your goals even get. And you become more and more confident, but you continuously have imposter syndrome. So as long as you have the tools to overcome them and you can keep moving, I think it's actually a weapon to have that imposter syndrome and to be able to push yourself beyond what you think would be possible or what on paper seems possible.
I think statistically, and I've quoted it many times, but so many high performers, and the myth from the outside is I have it, but I don't think you have it. But when you talk to people, almost every high performer I run into at one point or currently has a version of it. What tools do you use? I'm picking on the imposter syndrome bucket right now because I know it gets great traction with the audience.
Yeah, well, if I take it back to neuroscience, our brains are wired to focus on the negative. And so I can list 100,000 things that I'm horrible at, that I suck at. And if I, have a bad hormone day, or I'm, just tired or didn't sleep or whatever, my brain will more easily go in that direction. I think that's relatable to all humans. And so to be aware of that being the case, and then be empowered and know that like you actually have control to start changing your mindset. Sometimes it's just as simple as, what makes you happy? What gives you confidence? What are you good at? What are you proud of? And then you start to just change the narrative in your own brain to build yourself up to take on whatever the challenge is ahead of you. That we're going back to my sports psychology days. That is so relevant to my everyday life today. But then it got proven in neuroscience throughout that process.
I think literally Napoleon Hill, like 1934 on personal performance, but now they've proved it all out and why positive affirmations actually work from a neuroscience perspective. It's not fluffy at all. It actually is easily explainable and actually an easy little switch that we can all turn on you can do that to yourself. You don't need an extra outside source to kind of reframe your day.
Well, and it's not like, oh, you're having a bad one, you pull out the tool. It's like, this is actually a daily practice. Even when your brain is working well and you're positive, you should still be practicing that. I think that about
practice being the key word there. Practice,
daily practice. Like I think being happy is a daily practice. There's a lot of things to be sad about. And so if you focus on it, it's a bottomless bucket of sadness.
And the world will show up to reaffirm what you're already believing to be true, right? There's also that, right? Just don't turn the news on, whatever you do.
You kind of have to purposefully put your rose-colored glasses on, but not without, being rooted in still some reality and surround yourself
blindness
with those
and ignorance.
minds.
There's some different tendencies that we can tweak those words. Choosing to not focus on it doesn't mean I'm ignoring it or being ignorant and putting myself or my world at risk. And yet focusing on it is actually putting me at bigger risk.
Yeah.
By just simply getting down. Yeah.
Totally. And it's whatever gets you closer or fastest to your end goal.
Yeah. And being careful kind of what you let in, right? Being, years ago, I had a conversation with my business partner and I called him up and I'm being more the money guy. I was like, oh, we've got this problem, this challenge. He's like, you know what? I've got a creative project to work on today. And he goes, I'm practicing protecting my creativity. So can we talk about this later? It always stuck with me because it was such a great example of a very respectful, but very powerful boundary, but also someone who knew himself enough to just dial me back a bit as I was about to unload. He's like, I need to protect my creativity. We all, I think, have some version of that going on in our lives. I remember that it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it was so powerful because I was like, well done, my friend. Well done. I will talk to you later. And I probably worked it out and never even brought it up again.
Okay, you use unlike minds today, and I'll use that line.
100%. That is a very high value trade right there for sure. Back to, we can go down the neuroscience rabbit hole, so I'm going to pause. Thank you for being so honest and transparent and very real around imposter syndrome. I think that also showing people that look like they've got it all figured out, we're all still fighting the fights. We're all still climbing the mountains in our mind, right? When you look at OCIF, and not to pick your favorite child, because that's I would never ask you to do that. But when you look at these different hubs and these different area of focus, especially in your early days, what gets you the most excited? It's obviously the health and human performance. I think that's a giveaway. But are you? What's on your second tier of like, wow, I don't know a lot about aerospace, but I'm excited to learn. Or I don't know a lot about ag. What's kind of blowing your hair back right now in terms of your learning curve?
Well, this might be just a recency bias because I had a long meeting about the vision of the agriculture hub nice. And working with partners like the Calgary Stampede and their future plans. I don't think I can speak to them publicly yet, but I would say if just be excited because it's going to be city transforming, like, and everyone, whether you are in the agriculture field or not, will be affected in a positive way and proud of what's going to be created. And it's actually quite fascinating because it there's ag tech, and then that lends itself to food tech. And so I didn't even know that the inventor of canola is here, and part of Creative Destructive Labs, and understanding how that even came to be and how life changing that was.
It's also a great example of how Canadians are not great. I'm not going to say bad, but we're not great at touting our own stories.
Yeah.
Back to the marketing and comms. Well, a mutual friend, you're a good, I know, Wilson Acton is a good friend of mine. What they're doing with Tallgrass and that fund, and that's just one, because I know Wilson quite well. I get a ringside seat. Some of the tech that's coming through food and ag tech is just mind blowing. Like, again, like everything in tech, like it's just one notch away from what was sci-fi 5 minutes ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it just, there's a natural overlap with even just animal health, and as a dog lover, knowing that, maybe this could help my dog one day, or, and then of course the health
as my dog is sleeping behind me. Your dog's name is your dog named Jake? Did I remember that?
It is.
Oh, good. I do. Well, if you ever go to the dog park, I know more dog names than I do owner names. Always.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
Yeah, completely. Oh, your dog so-and-so. What do the parents say? I don't know them. I just we have dogs in common. So ag is, I get why ag would be exciting. And and who better? And like, who's better positioned than us, right? If you want to play that game too, like why anybody else? Why not us in why not Western Canada? Why not Alberta? Why not Calgary?
Yeah, I was once on a panel, and it was a question along the lines like, if you were mayor, if you could have, what would be like the main changes you would see for the city? And I had 3 things that came into mind right away, which was I wanted to be known as the most entrepreneurial, the healthiest, and the most dog-friendly city in the world. But you think of like, even if we were the most entrepreneurial and healthiest, like the ripple effect of that would be astronomical. Because
what's the outreach? If this one thing is true, what are the other 30 things that will become true because of it? The healthiest and the most entrepreneurial. So you have all the energy, because I know you and I've also talked about how important it is to protect your own kind of self from a health perspective, because an unhealthy you is not a contributor to anything, right? Let alone your community.
It's
was that also were you just setting us up to think that you're going to run for mayor next cycle? Is that
no?
No.
Could you imagine?
Considering that's top of mind, well, I could imagine actually
get going with the campaign.
No, I'm going to say next cycle. You're sitting back. You're just setting the stage for the future. I wasn't going to throw you in 6 weeks. I was going to throw you in at least in 4 years. Sorry, it's top of mind right now, and it's inundating all my feeds as I'm aspiring to educate myself on what is going on in our city aside from just focusing on some of the
imposter syndrome.
Oh, goodness gracious. But it's easy to point to all the negatives in our city. What I love about this and what OCIF and Calgary Development are doing is focusing on amplifying the positives, because we are a rapidly growing city, and that brings challenges, but it also brings opportunities. So how do we keep balance of those two things?
Beautiful. Yeah.
For everybody who's listening, so run us through the hubs again, because I think that's important. I had a politician tell me, when your audience is annoyed, that's when you know they're finally hearing your message. So let's not annoy them, but give us the hubs again. And then let's talk a little bit to kind of wrap up here. How do people get involved? If I'm a student listening, or I'm a scale up, or I'm an entrepreneur, or anybody in the mix in between, let's kind of just reset the table here at the end to give everybody a chance to get clear on the different ways they can get involved.
Yeah, great. So I'll just kind of recap that we have sectors, nodes, and hubs. So the sectors that have been identified where we have a right to win in the city is life sciences, which is quite broad. So the health and human performance kind of falls within that life sciences area. There's aerospace and defense, agriculture, creative industries, transportation and logistics, and energy transition.
Nice. That's pretty all-encompassing.
It's pretty all-encompassing. If I think about says like what,
yeah, I know. Yeah, totally. Yeah, very much. Like, well, we've kind of captured and I can think of, I've had conversations with people in each one of those groups, so immediately becomes relatable. And if someone wants to get involved from a student level, would they come in through one of those areas of a pre-bias that they're interested in, and then they would contact? And do you have champions that lead each one of those sectors inside OCIF?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not necessarily inside of OCIF, but each, if there's a bricks and mortar hub, one of the criteria is that there needs to be like an executive director, that true champion and lead. And we work very closely with them, especially at the early stages. Yeah. And then in addition to these hubs, we also have what I'm just kind of calling platforms. So we have Platform Calgary, Quantum City. There's talk about creating an AI Center of Excellence. I think Clayton Fike recently announced that with the acquisition of his company On Topical with Savra, which is backed by KKR. So that's now going to be growing within our city. Super cool. And then what would be another hub? I recently spoke to someone who really, he comes from the Valley, and he's excited about robotics. And he's like, I want to create like a robotics platform and center in Calgary. And he had all these reasons why Calgary was a place to be. He had even like these additional ideas to start like a drone flying club, which is apparently a thing, or a drone racing association or club.
It's funny. I know someone in Ontario who literally had a plot of land, and he put that on it, and he was swamped with people because they were looking for a place to come and play, and they do drone racing on the weekend. So it's so funny.
Yeah.
Did you say that? I was like, I don't even really know, but the little boy in me just thinks that sounds super cool.
Yeah, no kidding. I loved it. And so I love hearing these types of ideas. And if there's a champion
they're very infectious,
behind
aren't they? They're very enthusiasm building, right?
Exactly. And a lot of like the Platform Calgary, Quantum City, and AI Center or a robotics center, all of that is sector agnostic. So they really feed and amplify all of the existing sectors.
Well, Platform is such a great success. I always joke. I remember Terry came on and was like, in the first handful of guests I had on the show, he's like, Tyler, we're doing this thing and we're going to make it happen. And it's going to be a parking garage, but also a place that's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And now I can drive by it. And that wasn't that long ago. Like, I do love those little stories of like, oh, wow, I feel like I've been around for a while. That was a 5 year ago conversation. And now look what we can point to in terms of things evolving in our city. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And I'll also just add to your point about like, well, how can someone get involved? I really love the original Rainforest Alberta concept, where they would gather made great efforts to gather the ecosystem of tech back in the early days. Yeah. You had to sign a social contract.
They have like a bag lunch. Did they do bag lunches? And there was like
lunch without a lunch, they called it.
Lunch without a lunch. That's not bag lunch. It was lunch without a lunch. Yeah. That's right.
And you would sign a social contract, which is basically don't be a jerk. And
back to the start of our podcast conversation.
Totally. Yeah. And it's nice to see that play out. But if I were someone who's looking to get involved with the system, I think one of the biggest mistakes is what can these things do for me? And I think if you start to reverse that and ask yourself, what can I do for those sectors? What skills do I have that I want to contribute? And how can I make these hubs or sectors or companies better? That's the mentality that I hope people start thinking. And when you do come to a coffee meeting with someone or have an idea or want to get involved and you have that attitude, I promise you it will be much more impactful, and it will probably get you further.
I could not agree with you more. I love that that's how you wrap that on something that is very qualitative, but also 100% a true experience when you meet with someone and they're like, what can I do for you? Who can I introduce? Or they're just there to talk to you and learn from you. They're not there trying to manipulate into an ask. It changes the whole energy of the conversation. And you also then in turn immediately want to help that person. It's so simple. Out. Yeah, 100%. It's true. I love that you landed on that. Crystal, thank you so much for coming on. Selfishly, we were long overdue, so I was really looking forward to this conversation to kind of like, hey, what's Crystal up to now? Let's have a podcast. And your passion, your enthusiasm, and I personally was very excited when I saw that you got involved in OCIF, and that meant a lot to me, knowing you and the impact you've had in the city, and knowing that you chose to join this organization because of the impact. And I'm making a lot of suppositions just because I've known you over the last 5 years. So to be able to hear it now unfold and kind of the honesty of your journey, thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing, and always thank you for the work you do in the city.
Oh, and right back at you. I mean, we wouldn't be the ecosystem we are without people like you. So thank you. And it's always so fun to run into you, whether it's at Stampede or you volunteering for my charity.
100%. We've had some great experiences. That is the beauty of community right there, right?
Honestly, yeah. I think we both exemplify that and understand it. So yeah, it's an honor to be a part of this.
Amazing. Crystal, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.